Welcome back to the Thought Leaders podcast. Today I'm joined by a thought leader in the marketing space, content specifically, writing. We are going to get into all of it. Welcome to the show, Alexa. I would love to start with something that you've said before on your socials and in other places, which is that you think businesses might be getting a little lazy with their content these days. And I want you to dive into that. What does that look like right now?
Yeah, thank you for having me, first of all. And I really just think it's very, it's kind of just like a grab right now. Like everyone is kind of just trying the same tactics. I work with a lot of clients in the enterprise space, and every single client, I swear, has the same approach to content. It's like, oh, we need to do a webinar. Oh, we need to do these blogs. Oh, we need to focus on SEO. No one is really looking at doing something different and really kind of just looking at how they can expand their boundaries and expand their ideas and like just talk to people and really kind of differentiate like what makes their product good. Because with things like SEO, in my opinion, it doesn't tell me why I should shop but from this brand. It doesn't tell me like what makes their brand better. It's just saying, oh, well, this brand has the domain authority, so yeah, they're going to rank in Google. But it doesn't tell me anything about like them or who they are. And so I think that we need to kind of flip the script a little bit and go more towards like the personal, like almost more storytelling, like journalistic, I would say, focused content for brands, just because that's how you're going to stand out from the crowd and avoid getting lost in the SEO sauce. As I think that is way oversaturated now. And with AI, like you can literally ask ChatGPT the same question that you would get Google, like a Google result from, like, what is data strategy? You can literally ask that same question to ChatGPT. So what's the use of like taking up search space in Google for it anymore?
That is so interesting. And the thing that piqued my curiosity was the going more towards personal, going more towards storytelling for enterprise clients. What does that typically look like if, there might not be that founder-led story as much anymore?
Yeah, I think it's really infusing a lot of like SMEs, like a lot of subject matter experts, because I worked in house for an enterprise tech company for 4 years. I work with them as a contractor now, and there are people who are these subject matter experts in various industries, that various industry verticals, various industry topics. So I think it's really just getting them to infuse like their perspective, their research, what they basically spend every day of their job doing. And really getting them involved on like the content front and interviewing them, asking them, hey, what do you think of what the space is going to be like? And use that stuff to kind of inform some of this content. So instead of it just being this like research, very data heavy, it's like, let's blend the data with like the interviews to really kind of just like tell a complete and cohesive story.
Almost like a feature article that's a little like information heavy, but from a brand.
Yeah, so instead of like having the interviewees like you would in a journalism sense, your interviewees would be like your subject matter experts.
That's very cool. And how do you see that then translating over to a platform like Instagram or LinkedIn? Is that an approach that you would take there as well?
I think it could actually be an interesting approach depending on what the company's social strategy is. I know a lot of companies, depending on the platform, like they're going to be very focused on LinkedIn. But what companies really need to focus on from a social perspective is doing platform native content. And so what that means is like, and social native content. So it's like it's not going to be like, oh, here's a link to this blog. It's like, oh, how can we translate that into like a carousel or maybe like a video clip from an interview that they do or something like that that's going to get more engagement and clicks versus like, oh, we're just going to like post this link to this stale blog post, but it's kind of repurposing the content in that blog and making it more appropriate for the social platforms.
And kind of talking about social, I know that there's this big sentiment among at least solopreneurs or smaller businesses that they are sick and tired of social. Do you feel like that is happening as well in the enterprise space?
It's hard to say. I think they kind of, as having worked as a social media manager for an enterprise company, like there's definitely emphasis on it from like the C level and everything. But I think it's more of like, oh, well, we should be here and we should be on these platforms versus like we actually like have a strategy for these platforms. I feel a lot of it's like in the obligation space, especially for platforms that like really aren't B2B friendly, like Facebook and Instagram, for example. Like you'll have a lot of enterprise companies on like LinkedIn and Twitter, well, I guess X now. But then these other platforms like Facebook, I think they just had it because it was 2009 and it was cool to be on Facebook. But like it doesn't really align with like your audience. So I feel like there's a lot of, oh, we should, and doing it out of obligation versus, okay, what's the actual strategy here to where we can actually make an impact and connect with our audience.
And let's say they are maybe on social for that obligation piece, but they're trying to infuse their strategy. How can they really tell if what they're doing is working?
I personally think like look at the engagement. I think engagement is such a better indicator of whether your content's resonating with the right audience than impressions or followers, because you can actually see, are people liking it? Are people sharing it? Are people commenting on it? So I think that's a really good indication if the content's really hitting right. And of course, if you can get leads from your content too, like, yeah, social media shouldn't be the big like lead driver because that's not really the purpose of it. But if you can actually like start driving leads based on your content, then you know it's definitely working for you.
Something that you just said there was that social shouldn't necessarily be the lead driver. It's great when it happens, but that is something that I think a lot of people get wrong about social. What is social usually taking up in the strategy? Is it more brand awareness?
Yeah, it's definitely more on like the brand awareness front where it's like, okay, like let's start this relationship. Let's showcase the personality. Let's kind of give the audience like a glimpse into who this brand is, kind of like a first impression almost, before they decide to dive deeper into, oh, maybe I'm going to download a gated asset or maybe I'm going to hop on a sales call with like a sales consultant or something. But it's really kind of that like first impression, like showcase the personality and build the brand awareness versus like, oh, I'm going to use this as my lead driving mechanism.
So if they have social as their kind of top of funnel brand awareness play, what is essential to have then as kind of middle or next step?
Well, it's actually interesting because social, what I've seen is you can even put like different types of content in social. So you can have more of like very top of funnel, like very introductory type content. And you can even put like more bottom of the funnel, very specific content on social that maybe hits like a very specific pain point that your audience is facing. So you can actually use social throughout the entire funnel if you really like hone in your strategy around that. But then I think a good next step would be, I mean, I would just say like start mining the data too and like getting people to get on in your webinars and get like on your email list and downloading your assets and things like that. And LinkedIn is now starting to have really interesting capabilities with like, oh, these are the types of companies that looked at the company profile and these are the types of roles. So I think it can kind of help you hone in and find audiences and do a little bit more like account-based marketing versus like, oh, we're just gonna like, we think this is our persona and we're gonna kind of just, we have a shot in the dark. Instead, you can really hone in and leverage that data to then do some more targeted marketing campaigns around that.
And something you said before was like, a lot of companies, big and small, are sticking to the same strategy, sticking to that webinar, sticking to that, old freebie that no one's really enjoying anymore. But all of it is necessary, even with using social as a funnel. How would you want to see companies start to shake up their strategy?
I would just say, like, I just want to see more innovation. Like, there's so many other, like, opportunities for transmedia storytelling. So, storytelling like with really cool things on like with text assets, video assets, audio. Like I know a lot of enterprises are starting to do more like podcast stuff, but like even something like a video podcast, I think could be really cool. Even just talking with like a customer or just sitting down with somebody and having a conversation around how you're using the content or how you're using the solution. So just, I think just to get more innovative, because I feel like when we see these trends, like enterprise companies are like the very last to catch on. And like, and then they end up, it's like 10 years down the road and like the content infrastructure and like the content is completely changed. And then these enterprises are still doing stuff that they've been doing for the last 10 years.
And you kind of started weaving in there the long form piece, right? The podcast. We've talked a bit about the blogging. Where do you see the role of long form with these enterprises going?
That's hard to say because I know it's very much been in like, oh, we have to do a case study, we have to do an ebook, a white paper, but how can we translate those assets into something that's a little bit more, I guess, enjoyable? Like, even if like an ebook turns into like a workshop or like a master class or like something, because how many times do you have a PDF asset that you download and then never read? Like, I feel like that's the problem with stuff like that. The traditional long form content is people aren't taking action on it because it's just not, they're like, oh, I'm going to download it and then it's going to sit in my downloads folder for 6 months and I'm going to forget that it's there. But it's like, how can we do something where we can like take more action on it, whether it's like, like a LinkedIn Live or like a podcast or something where you get the same content, but in a different form that people are actually going to want to listen to and take action on.
And you mentioned before, like a lot of the storytelling would come from subject matter experts. Would you see kind of the same in this longer form? Like maybe it's a subject matter expert who's hosting the podcast or something of that sort?
Yeah, like I think that would be really cool. Like when I was working in-house, they tried to do it was like a customer focused podcast, but it was hosted by, can't remember what his job title was, but I think he was some sort of like digital strategist, evangelist, something or other, like at the company. And he was the one hosting it and like talking to the customers about it. So I think having that, do that, like having the subject matter experts like there, like, either hosting it or being a part of it, I think is a really great way to infuse more of that like storytelling, like expertise angle versus just like, oh yeah, here's what they did and like here's that, but make it more of like a conversation and adding actionable takeaways.
And you touched on being in-house and now being more of a contractor, more independent. What was that transition like for you? What was that decision behind it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was kind of almost like it was a very gut decision, I would say, towards the end of working full time in-house and everything. I was getting so burnt out with my job. Like it was just very demanding. I was a one person social team for this enterprise company who had just acquired another company. So I was managing like 8 different social accounts. So I had to do the management, the content, the coordinating with everybody. We were trying to implement a new software, like a management employee advocacy software. And so I just got so burnt out. And then I was like, telling my family how much I was struggling. And they literally planted the seed over like one weekend. And they were like, hey, why don't you just consider freelancing? Like you're a writer, you could be a freelance writer. That's like, once that seed was planted, like I did not let it go. I was like, I think I'm going to make this happen. And it was a very like gut decision. And it was like the best decision I probably could have made. So then I ended up the next week, like literally quitting my job. The same week I ended up moving across the country. So that was fun, but I definitely don't regret that at all because I think sometimes your gut decisions are like the best decisions that you can make for yourself.
Yeah. What prompted that move across the country?
I just really wanted to move. I'm from Denver, and I really just wanted to explore like a new city. I'd always wanted to live in the Pacific Northwest and specifically Seattle, and so I just decided to move. the rest of my family moved down to Florida. And so I was just like, I'm just gonna go and see how it happens. Cause one of my big life principle is I don't want to die with any regrets. So I'm just like, let me just do it and we'll see what happens.
That is so great. And such a story of like bold action right away and getting to just go for it.
Yeah, I definitely I'm a Gryffindor, so I'm definitely like no bravery, no courage, and take these like kind of crazy risks, not like way out there risks, but for the average person, they're like, wow, that was like kind of risky. I don't think I could have done that. And so when people tell me that, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I am kind of brave. I don't always think about that, but like when people tell me that, I'm like, yeah, I guess I am.
And kind of going back just a bit, what has with the transition, what have the challenges been now that you might not have expected when you did make that leap?
Who? I think just I guess just underestimating how much other stuff that like you have to do for your business, like, like the marketing, the admin, the like the sales stuff, and like really because everything just falls on you, so it's a lot more pressure that you really realize, because at least when you're working for a company in-house, like there's people for all that, right? And and it's not all on you. Like your manager, if they're accountable, they'll take a lot of the blame off of you and like step up for you. But like when you're working with clients as a business owner, it's on you, and you have to really hold yourself to like a high level of standard and a higher like higher level of standards, and just a higher caliber than you would if you were probably working in-house, because it's your butt on the line, nobody else's.
Yeah. And really getting to just going back to that bravery and courage piece, putting yourself there, you have to make things happen. You can't kind of rely on just, oh yeah, like whatever happens, I have a team around me, or I have higher ups, or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like this year for me specifically has been probably one of like the biggest years of growth for my own business. Like I'm doing things that like I have not done like since having my business and everything, and really kind of flipping the script and taking more risks and doing more things. But I feel the growth. Like I feel that it's like happening, but you have to do that. Otherwise you're kind of stuck in this like stagnant state of like, and you're really just caught in the status quo too, of like, oh, well, everybody else is doing this. Like I should be doing this. And oh, like, is this the right thing for me? Like, oh, but everyone else is doing it and has found success with it. So like, I should be finding success with it too. And that's not really the case. You kind of just have to look and say, this is what works for me, and just kind of put your blinders on for everybody else. And it's like, that's great that works for them, but that doesn't work for me.
Can you give us an example of one of those actions that's led to that growth?
I just think kind of just waking up, like with my business, like marketing, I think especially, like I'm not the best, I will be the first to admit, to market my own business. Like, and I think that it's very different in the freelancer space if you're like a true freelancer, just kind of gig worker, versus an online business owner. Because I think an online business owner, they do a lot more marketing stuff. Like I've noticed they put out lead magnets, they do like these marketing launch campaigns, they do like all of this stuff. Whereas like the freelancer will say, hey, I have capacity. Like, and, if you're looking for someone, great, sign me up. And like, there's like the whole services versus offers debate. So I've been kind of sitting in the middle of both worlds, and I have not found success the way like the freelancers find success, where it's like, oh, let me just like post on social and like see what happens. Whereas like, so now I'm trying to transition more into like the online business owner thinking of like, okay, I need to have like a marketing launch, like actually have some lead magnets, build my email list, like things like that, to kind of get that success, because I'm not seeing the success I want from the actions that I'm doing. It's just not working for me anymore. And so I'm like, okay, what can I try that's different, and kind of just strip everything away that's not working and just try something new. I think, so to answer your question, I really think it was just like the dissatisfaction of like where I'm at and like where my growth was. And I was like, I need to do something different if I want to see the growth that I want to see.
Absolutely. You kind of mentioned there's an offers versus services debate. What is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of an observation I have where like it'll be like an online business owner, it's like, "Oh, well, like I have this one package that I offer," or their offers are a little bit more like productized, and it might be a more like specific transformation of like, "Hey, I'm going to take you through this process and this is the transformation you're going to get." Whereas in the freelance world, and I've seen this even with myself, it's like, "Oh, I'm a content writer. I can write you long form blogs and like here's what you get like if you work with me." So it's really just like kind of like a company will come to you and say, "Hey, I need somebody to write me these blogs or this white paper. Like, can you do that?" Versus, "Hey, I need a really specific transformation in my business and a really specific action." And then that's when you're like going to somebody for that. So there's overlap, but there are definitely differences between like kind of being service fulfillment and then kind of going out and like finding people that like have the pain that you want and having an offer to match that.
Do you think that one is more aligned with enterprise clients, or do you think that it's just depending on how you position it?
I think it can be depending on how you position it, but I think more enterprise, it's more just like kind of that freelance gig mentality where it's like, "Hey, we have a specific job for you and this is what we want." Like they're not going to ask you to like do the strategy. Like at least, if like, I'm using freelance writing as an example. Of course, there's other different types of things where they might bring in a separate strategist, but usually from my experience, it's been a lot of the execution. They'll say, "Hey, we have this strategy and we need somebody to execute on that strategy." However, if you're in a smaller like startup space, they might bring on somebody who can do the strategy and the execution. So it kind of just depends on their needs, but a lot of the time it's really just like, "We have this one specific job for you, like can you do this job?"
I'm thinking so much about that difference again of services versus offers and the expectation of transformation. Just the word that you're using, like, okay, transformation versus doing a job almost.
Yeah, because like I mean, like let me see if I can give like a better example. So there's one like a lot of the people I follow in the online business space, a lot of their target market is creative service providers, like creative entrepreneurs. And so an example, like, and I'm in her program right now, Kelsey from Coming Up Roses, she does this whole program around launch campaigns. And so her program is literally just about how to build a marketing launch campaign around your offers and your business and everything. So then you're able to, get more sales, and make it a little bit easier to like actually market your business instead of just like, "Oh, I'm just going to throw up a post on social and see what happens," but actually like building out like a whole campaign around it like you would if you were like at a bigger company like marketing something. So that's kind of what I mean with the transformation. It's like, okay, like people are going to buy Kelsey's service and her program because they want to get more sales and they want to do XYZ with their business versus like, somebody who comes in as like a marketing consultant for like a company is like, "Hey, I can give you this strategy," but there's not like a clear transformation there. It's like, "Oh, well, I can help you, build a strategy and execute a strategy and whatnot and give you the tools," but it's just not gonna lay the same as if I don't know if I'm articulating that well.
No, I think it's so interesting just like hearing your thought process on it. Because I feel like I've definitely heard of that debate before. I just hadn't heard it in that particular way. And really I'm so curious in this program that you're in, like, if the launch model is working for you as a service provider, because I think so much of the launch model that I'm familiar with is like for coaches or for someone who has more of like a course. What has your experience been like launching as someone who provides a service?
Yeah, I'm still in the process of like getting my offers. I'm kind of in this process of like revamping my offers right now. So I have something to launch, but I just watched other people launch theirs in the course and like there's like these insane success stories where people have had like $50,000 launches because they've been able to build up their email list, like warm up their audience, like all of these things that like as a marketer, you're like, well, duh, like, but like as a service provider, you don't think about it in that way. Like you're like, oh, well, I need to find somebody who like has a need and all of that. Not like, oh, I can actually like put an invitation out there for people to like take a part in my offer. So TBD on that. But I mean, I've seen success stories with it, and I'm excited to like try it for myself and just see how that model works, because like I said, I'm looking at trying a different way than just, hey, I have capacity this month, like, like, and looking for clients that way.
And that can be so powerful, just to start to see yourself differently and start to shift. What has been kind of that biggest mindset shift, whether it's with launching, whether it's just with starting your business? What has been kind of that mental mindset transformation you've seen in yourself as you go through this?
Yeah, like one thing that's been on my mind lately is there's this wonderful gal, she's on Instagram. Her name is Iona, and she talks about like really her whole focus is on bravery, and how bravery is kind of, you have to step into this like new identity to kind of like get the results that you want. And so that's been kind of the biggest like mindset shift for me, is kind of taking on this new like braver identity and like this growth, because I want to see that. Like if I'm holding myself back because of, oh, this is the way it is, or oh, I don't think I can like get to that level, like you're not going to do anything. You can't be the person that's going to step in your own way. And I think a lot of us, especially of us who like get really bogged down in our thoughts and everything, we're our biggest hurdle, because we're like, oh, well, I'm never going to be this person, like I'm never going to get there. It's like, who says you can't? Like you just have to, do what you're doing, and like keep consistency, and just have a really like growth and open mindset instead of a scarcity mindset.
Yeah, and I do think, I'm not sure, if you're going deeper into being braver, but as we've already mentioned, even just in this interview, you've shown a lot of courageous acts throughout, even just starting your business. So I want to see more of how being braver makes you even bigger and better.
Yeah, and I think being a writer too, like I feel like for me, it's almost like you have that built-in bravery, because like for anybody to publish work on the internet is a big step. Like it is very hard to have that vulnerability to put something out on the internet. That's like your thoughts, your kind of inner workings, like, because everything is subjective. Writing, art, anything is so subjective. And so for me, I've kind of started getting into that groove as a writer of like being okay with like putting stuff out there. But now I just am like taking it to a new level where I'm like, I'm going to just try this and see what happens. And if it fails, it fails. If it succeeds, it succeeds. And just kind of go from that, because a lot of being a business owner is just taking risks and experimenting and seeing. And if you have to kind of just do that to grow. And because like, what do you really have to lose, right?
That is so good. And so just a great reminder for people. If people want to go on this bravery journey with you, if they, of course, want to hear more of your expertise, they want to hear more about how you are really helping companies big and small with their content marketing, how can they connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm pretty much on all the socials. I'm on Instagram, Threads, Twitter, X, and LinkedIn. So you can connect with me there. You can subscribe to my newsletter called Creatives Anonymous. I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes.
Of course.
But that's been my biggest project this year, of just like really exercising myself to like get my thoughts and ideas out there in a way that, people are going to read. And it's exciting for me when people come back to me in this newsletter and say, hey, that really resonated with me, and like I love this topic. And so for me, I'm like, that's when I know I'm doing my job right, when people are like getting what I wanted to get from them. And I talk a lot about those concepts too, like not being afraid to fail, and just really that first pancake, and getting out of Tinkertown, and like all of these concepts that as artists, creatives, as business owners, we think about all the time. And it's just really giving people like a place to be like, it's okay, you're not the only one who's thinking about this.
That's amazing. Yes, all of that will be in the show notes. And the newsletter sounds so good, just because it is all of the things that we're thinking, but maybe not addressing.
Yeah, like I just wrote my issue like this last week was really just talking about like the dichotomy between like the right brain and the left brain, because I think a lot of times we pit it against one another and we think, oh, well, we can only be left brained or we can only be right brained. But I have come to the realization that it's more of like a yin and yang relationship where it's like you have a little bit of both on no matter what side you kind of identify with, and you need both to actually create, because even if you're an artist, for example, there are more of like the technical left brain elements that you need to know to actually like master your craft, like knowing about human anatomy, knowing how to like mix paint colors, knowing about like perspective and things like that. So it's just a really interesting like dichotomy. So it's like I talk about things like that just like that we think about and everything, but you know, we're not really addressing. And so that's been a really fun outlet for me to talk about things I've been passionate about.
That's such a great teaser of what people can expect. And is there a way for if someone wants to sign up for the email list and they want to maybe read that previous one, is there a way to access that?
Yeah, so my newsletter is hosted on Beehive. So if any of your listeners are familiar with Beehive, it kind of also functions as like almost like a blog. So you have like your homepage where you have all the past archives of your issues. So at this point, at the time of this recording, I've published like 13 issues. So all of them are going to be on this like one homepage. So again, I can give you the link and put it in the show notes so you can people can kind of just peruse the issues.
Yes, that's so good. Just because, again, topics that we all need to hear. So thank you so much for coming on, sharing so much of your expertise, so much of your thought leadership. I really appreciate having you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on this show and everything. And I'm super excited to listen to the final product when it comes out.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.